The Democratic Alliance has called on police to establish a dedicated unit to investigate acts of sabotage on essential infrastructure. The party briefed the media in Johannesburg on what it called the service delivery crises in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. Now, in Johannesburg, thousands of residents have been left without water for more than 2 weeks after a lightning strike hit the Eikenhof pump station. In Durban, residents have been battered by service delivery backlogs following a strike by municipal workers. The DA's chief whip in the National Assembly, Siviwe Gwarube, said they suspect some water outages may be due to acts of sabotage. But let's unpack the state of South Africa's infrastructure. And for that, we are joined by Professor Richard Walls from Stellenbosch University's Department of Civil Engineering. Prof, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I saw the call made by the Democratic Alliance, and I had one massive question initially: is our biggest problem dilapidated infrastructure, sabotage of infrastructure, or just simple criminality? What's our biggest problem in your view?
That's a very big question. I mean, firstly, with infrastructure is very expensive, very important, and things do happen from time to time. Anywhere in the world, you will have a pipe burst, electricity pylon giving problems, substations experiencing challenges, rivers overflowing. So that's part. We can never design infrastructure to always survive every eventuality and everything that happens. However, when you see regular failings, regular problems, etc., that's typically a sign of lack of maintenance, lack of technical people managing infrastructure, etc. So could there be sabotage? Definitely. However, that really comes down to a case-by-case basis where you'd have to go to pump station X or sewerage works Y and check, was there sabotage there? But in addition to that, was there security in place? When something does occur, is it fixed? Because when something is not fixed and time goes by, that's when a small problem becomes a large problem, much like on your house. You've got a leaking pipe. You don't do something, suddenly the pipe bursts, and then you wreck your ceilings and walls, and you have a much bigger problem. So there does seem to be a couple of things at play here. But yes, there are major problems that our country is experiencing in terms of national infrastructure. Yeah.
So then we'll sit with some of the different ones, whether it be sabotage or the lack of infrastructure a little bit, and unpack that as we continue with the conversation. But let's look at some of the big stories that we've been seeing. The water outage in Johannesburg as a result of what we're hearing is a lightning strike at the Eikenhof pump station. And then, of course, service delivery issues in KwaZulu-Natal affecting water and power supply. Are we dealing with surface issues? And that's why we have to have this conversation around infrastructure. Are we treating the wound and not the cause?
I would typically say yes. Now, as I mentioned earlier, infrastructure is very expensive, and this is not something you fix quickly. This is 5, 10, 20 years of effort. Now, the South African Institute of Civil Engineers, SAICI, they produce an infrastructure report card every few years, and the last one just came out 2022. And that analyzes infrastructure and different types of infrastructure across the country as part of one of the sections of that report. And it does point to many challenges. Some of our infrastructure, national roads are not doing too badly, but other things, water networks and municipal infrastructure, etc., is struggling. And that's a combination of, as I mentioned, technical people, so suitable contracts, budget being put into it, management, etc., corruption, all those things influence it. And then, yes, you end up to the stage where you're going to pay for infrastructure maintenance. It's just a question of whether you pay for it in advance and you pay a smaller amount, or you wait for something to go wrong. Then you've got a disaster and you spend a lot more fixing the problem afterwards. So we're paying for it, but unfortunately now at a stage in many areas it looks like we're paying for it after events have happened. We're paying more money. That means there's even less money available for repairs, for ongoing maintenance, for staff, etc. So we're paying for it. It just depends on where and how.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about whether or not you agree with the Democratic Alliance. I mean, can we criminalize away infrastructure challenges? And I'm just thinking about just the resources that are necessary for us to then investigate criminal cases across the board, how backed up our criminal justice system is. Can we deal with sabotage of essential infrastructure? Is it something that is possibly going to assist us?
We do need to put effort into protecting our infrastructure. I agree. I mean, you have seen this with the train lines. There have been many things in the media, statements alleging issues within Eskom power stations and various other places. What's true, what's not, it's difficult to say. However, in South Africa, we do have problems with crime. We do have problems with just general damage to infrastructure. And yes, unfortunately, in many places we do need to spend money protecting it, because when something is damaged, it's very expensive repairing it. Can we cut it out together? I doubt it. I mean, we can get the best people to manage some of these systems, and unfortunately we have thousands of kilometers, train lines, and billions of kilometers of electrical infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And it will happen that copper is stolen sometimes. And no matter what we do, it's going to happen. However, you will see the better our security, the better our systems are, the lower the amount of damage will be. We're never going to cut it out altogether. I mean, it's just, that's not possible.
Can we start talking about our infrastructure backlog as a human rights violation, a human rights issue, or at least a future human rights issue? And the reason why I raise that is because I think about the floods that Durban had to deal with, or KwaZulu-Natal had to deal with over the past few years, in fact, because there have in fact been so many. What those have done to infrastructure, what weakened infrastructure those floods even found in place, such as struggling drainage systems. I mean, are we looking at a human rights crisis?
The more time goes by, the more you'll see these things emerging. Firstly, climate change is pushing events. It's very difficult to say an individual event was climate change. However, weather patterns are changing. We will see larger droughts, larger storms, etc., and those expose weaknesses. So let's say now the 1 in 50-year flood now occurs, let's say, more frequently than that. And when it occurs, if our infrastructure hasn't been maintained, then we lose more. Now we need to spend more putting it back, and then we suddenly cut out water. And then if we don't have water, we can't have hygiene, sanitation. Our hospitals run into a problem. Power lines go down. So yes, you have a knock-on impact where infrastructure can lead to a disaster across across multiple regions, health and hygiene and business, etc. And so infrastructure is the foundation of a functioning economy. And if that gets destroyed, you're going to destroy the economy ultimately. Yeah.
Are we funding infrastructure sufficiently? I think this is what we saw from the finance minister in the budget speech, a commitment of around 943 billion rand for infrastructure and major reforms. Is that sufficient? And really, I mean, at some point we talk about the numbers, but do they trickle down to the projects?
I think that's, in some instances, the bigger issue. Is the money getting to where it's needed? If there's corruption and the money disappears, or if incompetent people are appointed to, as contractors, and they get 100 million rand, but what they produce is substandard and it has to be redone, then you're very quick that money disappears and it doesn't get down to where it's needed. And are the basics being done? Are we maintaining it? Are we keeping it up? And as I mentioned earlier, we will pay for maintenance. It just depends on when and how. Yeah. And often, if we don't have decent maintenance schedules in place, we're going to spend a lot more money long term, unfortunately. Yeah,
and here's the thing: if you've been sitting in your house with no electricity for 2 weeks, or you've had no water for 2 weeks, you're feeling really essentially the effects of that infrastructure damage that really has been going on for a very long time. What's the solution? Because you've painted a very bleak picture. What's the recommendation?
Well, as I mentioned, it depends in the country, and the SAIC infrastructure report card points to many things. So there's a detailed report if people want to look at all the infrastructure, and it's not all doom and gloom, but yes, there's some major challenges, and it also depends on the country where you are. But we need the right people in the right places and cutting out corruption. Unfortunately, it's not rocket science, most of what needs to be done, but we do need to put the right people, qualified engineers, professional engineers in place and support them. And where there has been misuse of funds to stop it. I mean, it really comes down to the simple aspect, and then having schedules of maintenance, looking at who the people or how many people are, and providing sufficient infrastructure. I mean, there's a lot of fancy talk, but at the basic level, it's quite straightforward what needs. And the skills are in this country to do it, and the organizations in this country, we need to call on them rather than politicking.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we just moments ago, Aldrin and myself were talking about a leader in the Northwest Province, in a very senior government position who has no matric. So, again, skills, very, very important. But let's leave it there, Prof. Thank you so much for your time. That there was Professor Richard Walls from Stellenbosch University's Department of Civil Engineering.